I was the first divorce coach in New Zealand in 2015, so it's been a 10-year journey so far. One client who decided he needed a break from life, went to Bali on holiday on his own, had a great time, emailed his wife and said he's not coming back. When you make that call, really sit with it and know that there's a 90% chance that you won't go back. Really think about the impact that's going to have on you, your financial future and your relationship, because if you're arguing in the High Court and you've got children, how does that bode well? We can't control or change what that other person is doing, but we can control and change how we show up and what we do.
So you've coached people through hundreds, literally, of divorces. What's the single biggest mistake that you see people making as they navigate that process?
What I feel is one of the biggest mistakes is
Are you in a relationship and wondering if it is the best version of that relationship that it could be? Well, stick around for this episode. I have a great chat with Kimberlee Sweeney. She is New Zealand's first and also certified divorce coach. We go deep into how to navigate relationship complexities, if you are considering a divorce, what that means, what it costs, how to show up with pride, and how to be conscious and aware of all of the consequences of the decisions that you make if that is a journey that may be ahead of you. Enjoy the conversation. She gives some really good tips, some tools, and she's really kind with her sharing and the stance of what it might mean to navigate that journey. Enjoy the chat. All right, Kimberlee Sweeney, New Zealand's #1 divorce coach. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome so much to the show.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, Josh. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, what a pleasure. So what's the most absurd reason that someone's given you for wanting a divorce?
The most absurd reason, there's been a few, but I think what comes to mind is one client who decided he needed a break from life, went to Bali on holiday on his own, had a great time, emailed his wife and said he's not coming back. She has the kids. She loses the plot, so he comes back, but he convinces her that the marriage is over. He rings me for some support on how to work through this because he was in a hurry to get back to Bali. He just decided that his life was now going to be in Bali, so he wanted his half of all the assets so he could go and live forever in Bali.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did she have any notion that this may have been coming?
I don't think so. She seemed quite blindsided by it. And he was the main earner. She worked part-time and looked after the children. So I think probably for her, I didn't speak to her because I was just working with him, but I'm sure for her it would have been quite a shock. And, that fear of what now if I haven't got my husband and the main earner in the family here, what happens now? She was expected to sell the house and give him his half.
Wow.
Yeah.
You deal with everything, I'm out. Yeah, that's remarkable. I think, potentially a bit of a midlife crisis thing going on, which I will share my story about that later on in related to this conversation. And Bali has a free spirit, free soul association with it. And there's, in particular parts of the island, especially Canggu, it's the world's most attractive people have gone into a series of dice and they've been scattered through Canggu. So you may turn up there at a certain age and stage and go, wow, there's a lot of beautiful people here. And wow, I feel like I'm tied to life and whatever else it might be. And so this could be my chance.
I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah, I'm just going to stay here. So that's quite crazy.
It might be where he was and where he maybe is now.
Maybe indeed. Yeah, wow. That's a brain explosion. So you've coached people through hundreds, literally, of divorces. What's the single biggest mistake that you see people making as they navigate that process?
What I feel is one of the biggest mistakes is to not have a conversation with your partner before you leave. Yeah, just letting them know how you're feeling. Many people feel blindsided that they had no idea that their partner wasn't even happy about, being in the relationship anymore, let alone just packing your bags and leaving without a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned that word twice, and so I'm guessing that you see that regularly. What are the consequences of blindsiding someone?
The consequences of blindsiding someone is that you're not setting yourself up for an amicable divorce. We've still got to communicate with what that looks like when we're going to start separating assets and, divvying up items and sharing custody of children if we've got children. So, if you want to kind of formulate a new relationship with that person that's more amicable and moving forward collaborative in the sense of, collaborating on what the assets looks like or what the co-parenting agreement looks like, then you're not setting yourself up for success by not, having those conversations in those early days.
Yeah. Having been through a divorce myself, and at times it looked like it was potentially going to get acrimonious, I understand the costs and the risks associated with that.
Yeah.
The story is, the tagline is, the lawyers are the only people that win in that situation, because you end up in a messy, time-consuming and very expensive situation.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of thing that one of the things you're endeavouring to circumvent?
Absolutely. If somebody's working with a divorce coach, first and foremost, we're helping you craft what the conversations are to go home and have with your partner and your children for a better outcome. But then we're also helping you prepare for what you need to go and see your lawyer about, what information you need from your lawyer, what information you need to gather for your lawyer. If that's all done with a divorce coach first, you're going to save yourself a lot of time and money on legal fees and just the negotiation part of it, right? Like if you can do a lot of that yourself before you go and see a lawyer, then you're using your lawyer much less, which is going to cost you less.
Yes, yeah, got it. I was going to ask you, what does a divorce coach do? You've actually just explained it very well. Thank you.
Pleasure.
The other thing that I see in terms of if there's like a badly behaved lawyer involved in the scene, and they're human beings, and so sometimes they may get their own kind of humanness caught up in that situation, is that they look after their interests perhaps alongside the clients. In other words, they let the meter run and run and run. And I was in a situation where my personal divorce was looking like it might end up getting very messy. And so I spoke to the trust lawyer, who was a QC, KC in these days, and I said to her, look, I'm intending to try and navigate this myself because I believe that I possibly can. And she said, I don't normally say this to people, and you won't hear this from my profession, but that's actually the best thing you can do, is try and navigate your way through to a solution yourself. And we actually managed to do that very well.
That's so good. And that's the thing. People, sometimes automatically, the first thing they do is run off to a lawyer before they've even maybe talked to their spouse, or anyone else. So if you're going to allow the lawyer to run the ship for you, it is going to cost you money, and it's taking control of what you can control, and the decisions you can make is what's going to be important for a better outcome in a cheaper divorce, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was working with my research team in pulling together the guts of the conversation and the arc of the journey of where we might go. And what became obvious to me is that I thought that we would be talking about the multi-million-dollar marriage exit. And that's definitely something that we will touch on going through that journey. But actually, there's so many correlations between navigating a divorce, like a life partner divorce, and also navigating a business partnership and either selling that business and separating from that asset, or navigating the separation of a business partnership, managing the ego, the complexities of the relationship, the contractual tie-ups that are involved. I'm guessing there's other things that would be related between those two things there as well.
Absolutely. And I've experienced both. I've experienced the breakup of a business and a marriage, and they are very similar. I always say that my first divorce was when I exited my first business with a business partner, and we'd been in business for 10 years. It was very successful. We'd grown it and had a lot of staff involved. And I just got to the point where a little bit of burnout, working 6 days a week, managing everything, but still hands-on in the business as well, feeling like I was probably the one that kind of ran the ship. And I just got to the point where I thought, if I'm going to have children, I can't see that I can continue working this way. So I asked my business partner if she wanted to sell it as a whole or buy me out. And, after 10 years of having quite a good relationship and working relationship together, I just saw a whole different side of her, and it did turn into, quite a messy exit, and felt like a divorce. Really did feel like a divorce. Yeah.
How did she handle it? Was it like an attack on her character? Is that the way that
I
she
think
responded?
she took it personally, that I was leaving because it was about her, and she wasn't understanding that it was for me and my needs. And then, of course, when we come to negotiating a business, the person that wants to get out always wants their share, and the one that's staying doesn't want to pay what is maybe equitable. So we had a little bit of a standoff on that, but I stayed in the business to get through the busiest time of the year, and we made quite good profit. So in the end, it all kind of worked out fine with what I got from my share of the business and the profits by the end of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That business was in which space?
Beauty therapy. So yeah, I've been a beauty therapist for over 30 years and still run a beauty clinic myself. So I'm a dual business owner and hands-on with both still, but it's very satisfying doing
Yeah.
the two. Yeah.
There's a lot of, I would imagine, that nature of that service business is about enabling people to make themselves feel good about themselves. And I'm guessing there's a correlation between that and being a divorce coach. Am I right?
Absolutely. And that was the thing. So I went through my divorce 14 years ago, came out the other side of it after a couple of years with a very young child, when we finally were kind of getting on and able to communicate well about our child's needs, and realized that people really needed help with that. And then I noticed that my own clients with my beauty business, who knew I'd been through a separation, were coming to me questioning their own relationships and wanting advice on what it looked like and how did I know and what did I do. And I found myself kind of just assisting people, not encouraging, obviously, but I realized at that point with my journey and what they were going through that people needed help outside of lawyers. So I started investigating what I could do to retrain and come up with a whole new career model for myself. So yeah, I was the first divorce coach in New Zealand in 2015. So it's been a 10-year journey so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was smirking as you were saying that, only because I had the same experience. Once I'd gone through my separation and then through the divorce, all of these people started to talk to me about how they were unhappy in their relationship and they were thinking about leaving and what should they consider, and then you get known for that. And so I had a number of folk over time that I kind of helped them navigate that, their side. I'll come back and talk to that in a second. I'd like to wrap up the story with your beauty clinic partnership. So how did that ultimately end? So it was a challenging, it was a sticky situation. Did you bring in a mediator or a lawyer, or did you bring a business broker in? How did you end up kind of navigating the separation there?
Good question. Well, I mean, the clinic was in the middle of Auckland CBD, so a lot of my clients were lawyers and accountants, and lots of free advice given. And I used my very good lawyer, who I still use now to this day. So she's probably been a lawyer and a client of mine for nearly 30 years, and she was just very good at giving sage advice and probably, brokering the deal as such. We had an accountant for the business who had it valued, and then we had a second valuation done because I wasn't happy with the first one. And then we kind of worked through, what that looked like in terms of splitting, the sale of the business between the two of us. And she decided in the end that instead of selling it as a whole, she would buy me out, my business partner. So that took her a few months to kind of get the money together to do that. So I continued to work in the business for probably 4 more months while we negotiated that. But it was tense, like there were moments where I was wondering why I was still there. But the outcome in the end was, worth it for me. So we got through the busiest time of the year, and then I shook hands and said goodbye, and we've never seen each other since.
Well, is that right? Yeah. You mentioned that it still exists on Queen Street, been sold a couple of times since then, but the business continues on. Do you have any sense of pride, by the way, associated with a business that has a legacy like that?
Yeah, I do. Like we were working in the business, the two of us, and we purchased it off our boss. And so it had been, I want to say probably it's been around for about 40 years now. So it has a very good clientele, good base clientele in the CBD. And the young girls that have now got it are the same age that I was when I, brought it. And it's lovely to see them thriving and succeeding. And I meet them at different training courses that we're on. And it is a sense of pride that, we kind of built that business and increased its revenue over the years and increased the clientele. Yeah.
Knowing what you now know, so that was 10 years ago?
It was 20 years
20 years ago. Okay, great. So 20 years ago, and you've been on the journey of many, many certifications. You've now coached hundreds of people through divorces. How would you have handled that conversation with your then business partner, knowing what you know now?
Good question. I would have, I thought I handled it well at the point in time, but I definitely could have probably sat her down in a different setting outside of work, I probably did just throw it at her one morning when she walked in the door because I'd just had enough. So yeah, I think, thinking about and planning that conversation and doing it in a setting that is neutral and comfortable for both, and giving her some time to process it before giving me an answer, just letting her know that that's where I was at, much like a divorce. Talking to your partner first about where you're at, what you're feeling, so you can maybe come up with a plan together.
Yeah.
Mm.
I heard once that context is more important than content.
Yeah.
And I think setting the context of that situation is perhaps the thing that I've heard you say there. Approaching it in the right way, at the right time, in the right forum, would probably be more important than the words that you communicated across to your ex-business partner.
Yeah. Like I really do recognize that I kind of blurted it out first thing in the morning, and then we got on with our day of fully booked clients and had to pretend it all didn't just happen, and then somehow come back round to that conversation at the end of the day. So yeah, there's definitely a better way I could have managed it myself. Yeah.
So, divorce coach, for the uninitiated, they might hear that title and think that your job is to talk them out of getting a divorce. And I know from my own experience and observations of others is that there's a certain point that you get to and you go, I'm checked out, right? I just want to be able to move on from this thing. And so how do you navigate that conversation? What does a typical early conversation look like with a client who comes to you to say, I'm in this situation? What does the process look like?
Well, firstly, I do get a lot of people that think I'm encouraging people to get a divorce. So
that's the alternative.
Nice to hear that you think the alternative.
Okay, right. You help people get, okay, right. Yeah. You should get divorced.
That's not good. You should leave him. It's not who I am. And I have recognised in, the years that I've been coaching, probably 2 or 3 years into my coaching practice, I recognise that it isn't always about just leave, just leave if you're not happy. And so I actually have gained certification with the Gottman Institute to do a little bit of relationship coaching as well, just to help people explore those options. If you're going to still be there, what are you doing to make it work? I get a lot of clients in that should I stay or should I go phase. So they come to me asking me to tell them what to do, And of course, as a coach, that's not my job. I don't think that's anyone's job to tell somebody to leave their relationship. But I spend some time with them exploring what they've done to try and improve things, work with them on communication or conflict management coaching to go home and see if they can turn things around. I am quite passionate about saving marriages, like I think, and you would probably agree, when you go through a divorce, even if, you were the one that decided to leave, it's still a journey, and it's a really tough journey. And so really kind of reality checking clients' decision making, on, what will this look like for you if you do leave? What do you need to start thinking about before you just pack your bags and go? And so I can work with clients in that space for quite a few months, sometimes a couple of years before they finally decide to leave, because they need to maybe get back into the workforce or just start thinking about their own needs and separating themselves emotionally from that relationship, so that it's a slower process that will go better in the long run.
Yeah. Not purporting myself to be a specialist like you, but my instinct became, when people started to talk to me after my own divorce about they were considering it, my instinct became, my first question was, what have you done to make the marriage work? And help them see that that was actually the best path, because my belief afterwards, having gone through that journey, is that actually the best path is to make that relationship work. There was something that kept you together, unless it was like a really toxic relationship, which is relatively rare. Often there was kids involved. They'd been together for minimum 10, sometimes 25 years. And so there had been something really strong that was in place. What do you see within most relationships when there had been something incredibly strong that then pushed them to the place of wanting to come and talk to you about the notion of getting a divorce? What's the most common couple of 3 threads that you see that goes wrong in people's marriages?
Yeah, look, when I can definitely recognize what is an unhealthy relationship, and maybe it is better to end that relationship, but also I can recognize if they have had a strong relationship for many years, what's happening right now that's created this mindset for you to just want to walk away. And so when we dig into that, it's often financial, hardship, especially the last few years with COVID and people losing jobs or businesses. That's really put pressure on families. Sometimes that can be midlife, men or women. I think we all go through that little bit of midlifeism. So whether it's menopause or for men, just, that wanting something different. And I think hard to accept, that our bodies are changing, we are changing. So there's a little bit of that. You're not the same person that you were 20 years ago. And of course we aren't. But have we, put the work in to grow together and kind of work through the problems together? Sometimes with the financial pressures, it can be one person taking on all of that, worry and concern and not really letting the other person in. So what have you done to bring your partner in to understand where you guys are at and how are you going to work together to get out of this, So yeah, those are the probably two most common threads.
Yeah. It's interesting. I went through a reasonable period of relationship counselling and therapy, and when we said to our therapist that this is the place that we've landed because we decided to have a session after we'd made that decision, I'd made that decision, she said, you guys can walk away with your heads held high because you've done a lot of work to endeavour to get this working well together. And so we'd really put in the mahi to try and kind of keep that union together. For me personally, however, I'd gone through a bit of an identity crisis because I'd sold my first company, and that left me kind of drifting in the wind. And I then started to question everything. And the way that I describe it is that I had a hand grenade in my own life situation, because 6 months or so after that, I decided that the right thing for us to do was to separate, and that then creates a whole flow-on series of consequences that you know that are coming, but you don't know what they're like to navigate. Sale of the home or negotiation of the separation, sale of the home, friends, family, judgment that comes along, all these sorts of things. And I'm probably missing some things that you have to contend with. What is a typical divorce journey, if there is such a thing? What does that look like in your experience?
Well, I think it comes down to also whether you've got children or not, like it's easier to separate assets and divvy everything up and go separate ways and never see each other again. But when you've got children together, you're going to be forever in each other's lives, navigating the co-parenting. And then when the children are older, you've still got graduations and weddings and grandchildren and all those things. So in that instance, they're never really out of your life.
So I think people may stay in marriages for longer than they potentially should or could, because of the notion of sunk cost bias. Sunk cost bias is the thing that I've spent all this time and all this money and resources. That's a business-related thing typically. And so therefore I should stick around and try and make this work. The sunk cost notion is that that's gone, right? And so there's costs and consequences of holding on to something for too long. And so what have you seen people do quite badly in relation to not making the decision, not seeing that the right thing for them to do could be actually to consider exiting that relationship?
Good question. There's all sorts of things that come to mind with that, in the sense that, many people, there's often one person in the relationship that's the bigger earner, and so they feel that they own more of that relationship property. And so them getting their head around the fact that it is divvied up 50-50, and they do stay longer because they don't want to give half of everything. And so they stay, but then it causes a bigger breakdown in that relationship. Often both parties end up kind of living separate lives within that relationship, and it gets quite toxic and unhealthy to be in. And so it's that whole, at some point you've just got to cut your losses, don't you? Yeah.
What do you think of relationship property agreements in principle?
Look, in principle, I get it, because, even the person that hasn't been the main breadwinner has often been, the main caregiver of the children, or the main person keeping the home fires burning so that that other person can work big hours and bring in the money. But they have put their life on a back burner, or their career on a back burner. So, it is going to be harder for them if they don't end up with 50%, because they've got to start again. They've got to start a new life. They've got to maybe retrain, got to get back into the workforce and earn a full-time living to support themselves. So I can understand why the law is the law, even though I can also understand why it's hard for that person that was maybe the main breadwinner to feel like they are, walking away with less than they deserve. So I see all points, but I understand also.
Mm. Having gone through a process of rejoining with someone and having a very good, healthy relationship now, we've navigated that process of the RPA, and the trust lawyer that I work with, she was very clear that it needs to be fair, clearly communicated, and continually spoken about. Case law now in New Zealand dictates that sham trusts are being busted open, so trying to hide assets away in trusts, which I understand that some people can do, and patently unfair situations where someone retains everything that they've brought, even though the other person has given up a career. They're not being treated as being reasonable or fair any longer. And so, it's interesting to see how that's evolved in law over time.
It is, isn't it? And, it's the thing, it's very hard to hide anything in trusts anymore. And, if you, and I work with clients that are, coming out of relationships and maybe dating or going into new relationships. And so it's helping them understand that they need to protect their share of their assets, right? And so a simple contracting out agreement to just kind of start that relationship on an even keel, so that there's no kind of concerns or worries about, what if this doesn't work out? What will that look like for what you've each brought into that relationship? And I always say to clients, I'm not here to give legal advice, but don't be afraid of a contracting out agreement, because it can be changed and updated as the relationship continues to grow and becomes more permanent. It can be abolished, or it can be minimized, or what have you. So, it's never set in stone forever. And it's the same with parenting plans. I say the same to clients with parenting plans, like, this is a plan for the ages and stages of your children. It's not till they're 18. We regroup, we have a look at it every 6 months or a year and make changes that suit the dynamic of the family.
I don't have kids, and so the notion of a parenting plan is unfamiliar to me. What would one of those look like?
Yeah, well, look, I'm a big advocate for parenting plans. That was where we, came a cropper with our divorce. Wasn't really the divorce process per se. It was more the co-parenting situation and finding our feet with how we shared custody of a 2-year-old, and what that looked like. And so it took us a couple of years to even know that there was such a thing that could be put in place. It's become more common now, and we've got different agencies now involved to help couples that maybe aren't seeing eye to eye with their co-parenting relationship and situation. So FDR mediation or a divorce coach can help you put a parenting plan in place, just so that there's structure, there's routine, everyone, including the children, know what each week looks like and who they're with and when. And we know if there's costs involved with the children, that how are they split between both parties, and all those little things that tend to crop up and cause some unrest, or, a little bit of, what's the word? Just makes it more acrimonious, I suppose, So if we can prepare clients with a plan earlier on in the piece, it does help to avoid any conflict with that co-parenting relationship.
Do you think that if people were more conscious about that before they got to the situation where they needed to have a co-parenting plan because they were separating, what am I saying? If they were clearer about how they parented in the first place, that they may not have ended up in a separation situation?
Absolutely. And that's a very common question, like, if, say, the mum has been the main caregiver, she still wants to have the majority of the custody, but the dad is saying, well, I'm still entitled to see my children 50% of the time, and I want them in my care for half the week or what have you. So what does that look like? And it does mean that often that parent that hasn't been the main caregiver does have to, take a bit of a sidestep with their career or work to be able to navigate and manage the care of the children when they're in their care. And if they've done that in marriage, then, and shared the care and shared the chores and all those things, then perhaps they wouldn't be in the situation that they currently are.
Yeah. You mentioned COVID putting strain on things and financial strain that's been coming up over the last few years. I observed some people in relationships over COVID realize that they perhaps weren't compatible with their partner anymore because they'd been in a situation they were focused on work or on outside activities, social pursuits, whatever it might be, raising kids, but separately, but together. And they end up sitting at home for every hour of the week and day for 24/7 for a period of 3-4 months or so. And I observed a couple of folk that went through that process. There was anecdotally a spike in divorces over COVID. Did you observe that?
Absolutely, yeah. My practice got even busier over that time. And I mean, for me, coaching most of it's online on Zoom or phone or FaceTime. So it was a lifeline for many people to be able to reach out to somebody like myself who was there for them when they still had to be in the same house and navigate what that looked like. And often they had decided during COVID that they were going to separate, but they couldn't move out of the bubble, the house. And so they had to navigate how to live together until they could separate, whether it was practically or financially. So it was a lot of people in that phase of basically putting a co-parenting agreement in place, getting them to share custody within that household so that one person didn't feel like they were trying, because often they were trying to work and look after the kids and my partner's not helping. And so it was like, okay, well, let's have a bit of a timetable of what a day looks like, who's going to do what with the kids when, so that you can both focus on your work and then have some separate time alone, right? So do your walks around the block with the kids only or with yourself. So all of that. And you're right, I think when you're thrown into that kind of situation and there's 24/7 with no outside contact, no friends, no family that, would normally kind of break things up a little bit for that dynamic of a relationship, it showed the cracks in many relationships. And I kind of likened it to, for myself, when I had my child, I was a businesswoman. I worked 6 days a week. I worked late nights. So, we didn't spend a lot of time together as a married couple until I had a baby. And then I realized, that things weren't what they were perceived to be. And we had a lot of friends that were just shocked, that we'd come to this decision with, we'd been together 15 years, we're older parents, finally decided to have a child, and then it all imploded. But it is all about, that not having that balance of work life and outside parties, friends, people that kind of break things up a little bit for you.
Yeah, I've observed that on quite a number of occasions. People have kids later, and then within the kids are under 3 and they're going through a separation process. I've made it mean from the outside that I haven't raised kids, but I understand the stress, the tension, the lack of sleep, the massive shift of lifestyle and focus and priorities, and I've made it mean all of those things. But it sounds like there was also an element of we didn't have to spend so much time together beforehand, and now we do, and agree upon some things. Is there phases that you see that are risky phases in people's relationships that they should perhaps be aware of, like an orange light kind of thing?
Look, what came to mind just then for me was, I think a lot of people are starting to have kids younger again now, and I think it's very wise because you become very accustomed to the lifestyle you've created for yourself as two people working, traveling the world, doing whatever you need to do. Without children, you've got more freedom. And so if you've experienced that freedom to then have kids later in life, it does change the dynamic of the relationship and the lifestyle that you've been accustomed to living, right? And if one or both of you don't cope with it, then there's just discontent right throughout that relationship. And often there's one person that feels like they're, carrying the mother load of the child rearing and the, keeping the home fires burning and looking after the home. And they want to be at work as well. They're kind of like, why can't I go back to work now? So I think it is wiser to have children earlier, then you don't know what you're missing. And you can experience all those fun things when the children have grown up and, left home and you're still young enough to do the traveling and all the fun things. But yeah, thinking about, your earlier question of what is the common things, I think that's the third common thing is people, having children and not being on the same page with what that looks like before they have children. What are our expectations of each other? How are we going to share the load? Is one person going to stay home or are we both going to work and juggle this? So having some conversations around what child rearing looks like together as a team before you go into it, I think is a wise thing.
Yes. So imagine that I'm watching or listening to this show and I'm unhappy in a relationship and I go, maybe I should get in touch with Kimberlee, but I just want to know a little bit more about, what it is and how it works. What would be a couple of the classic kind of opening questions? Coach, their raison d'etre is to question, not tell. Ask, don't tell is the thing that you learn in coaching school. And many, many other things, obviously. And so what would be kind of the first couple of 3 questions that you might ask someone who contacts you?
It depends on what they share with me often, like everyone's situation is unique to them. But I suppose one of the first questions I ask is, what have you explored? Have you been to couples therapy? Have you talked to your partner about how you're feeling? So kind of where are you at with what you've communicated and what have you explored about your thinking? The next question would be, what would life look like if you did leave? What do you need to start considering and thinking about before you leave if you decide that you are going to leave? And then maybe what if your partner doesn't want this? Then what? What are you going to do to try and turn it around and make it work if they really don't want to go through with a separation? Yeah. So looking at all the options with them, reality checking their decision making before they make them.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. One of the things that I learned about doing couples therapy with two different therapists in two different relationships over time is that the temptation is to turn up with a problem that the other person has. And then immediately what you learn is that the mirror gets held up to you. And that's quite gritty and quite confronting for people to go through. Is that the model that you utilise as well to some extent?
A little bit, like we aren't counsellors per se, but, just with the line of questioning, we do get them to kind of, hold a mirror up or put yourself in that other person's shoes and think about what they would think or respond to. So, yeah, as we kind of call that reality checking, so just getting them to think about alternative options rather than just their one line of thought processes, because people come with their own ideas, don't they, of how they want to run this and what they want to do, but it's kind of giving them a few other thought processes to consider before they make their decision and communicate it.
Yeah, I get it. So imagine a situation where someone's gone through the process with you and they're just in the very back end of the separation, so they're getting their own life available to themselves again, to whatever extent that means, depending on the co-parenting situation. What are some of the mistakes that you see people make when they go back out into the world again as a free and single person?
Yeah, look, I'm going to be a bit gender specific here because it does vary depending on, what gender you are. So I find that women, and especially mums, they really just dig in and focus on rebuilding their career and looking after their children, and they don't really take as much care of themselves as they should in those early phases. So with those clients, I'm encouraging them to look after themselves and what are you doing for you right now? And when you do have some downtime, what are you doing to get out there and be social with just catching up with friends or, just those types of things. So I kind of have to push women to take care of themselves more or put themselves out there a little bit more, whereas men don't need that push. They tend to, they put themselves first and they're out there trying to find a new partner and living their best life, which is great, but don't forget about your responsibilities at home as well, So, yeah, everyone has their different way of dealing with it. And it's not always, men versus women, but some people just don't like being on their own. So they do want to get right back out there in the dating scene. But I always say, at least have your relationship property agreement, your settlement agreement signed, sealed and delivered before you start that, because trying to navigate that process with a new partner is never going to go well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When people ask me, I'm midway through this process and or I'm thinking about embarking upon the process, the advice that I gave them, and I'm curious about your thoughts about this advice, is that the first thing is if they're committed to it, then I would say to them, give more than you think that you should. This is typically men that would be talking to me about it. In fact, always men, never women. Give more than you think that you should. Normally they're in the situation of being the main income or the wealth generator in the household. And the reason being is that, are you going to make more? That would be the question that I'd ask them. Are you capable of making more wealth over time? And is that the skill set that you're leaving behind in the household? And typically it wasn't, because they were the wealth generator. So be more generous than you think that you should. First piece of advice that I gave people. And the second was settle quickly. So get the contract signed, if you are committed to doing that, as fast as you possibly can. Am I on the right track with that advice, or am I misplaced?
Definitely, in your first lot of advice is what a lawyer would probably, a good lawyer would recommend as well, because if you are not going to be generous at the get-go, then you're going to drag this out and it's going to cost you a lot more in legal fees, and as it will your ex as well. And that impacts, the children and their needs, because anything you take financially away from each other, the children also miss out. So it's kind of recognizing that, I want to leave my children in as comfortable a position as possible. Yes, their lives are changing and they might have to live in a different type of home, but I don't want them to be living in poverty, and I want their mum to be able to give them everything they need whilst, trying to rebuild her career or what have you. So if you go in with that mindset that you've recommended, then you are going to resolve things a lot faster because there's less argument about what that division of property looks like, and hopefully that other person can see that you're being very fair and very generous, and instead of fighting for them, will they accept it, but thinking about the impact on the children always with all the decision making, when it comes to even the financial settlement, because it will impact your children if you're not going to be generous when you've got the ability to be generous, Yeah.
Speaking of children, I've heard of the Band-Aid baby. The other situation that I've heard of and seen is baby trapping. So men that go typically out of the relationship and then get with a much younger woman and think they're footloose and fancy free, and then all of a sudden the woman's pregnant. I've seen that happen 3 times actually with people. And so the thing that I now say to men that are going through this process, again, it's men that speak to me about this, is curious on your thoughts. Make no major life decisions for the first 12 months. Find yourself somewhere to live, preferably rent somewhere, because then you're not committed to that particular part of the world. It's probably going to be close to the kids if you have some kids. Do not commit to a major relationship. Do not sell your business. Do not change jobs. Have some stability outside of that massive seismic shift that you've gone through, because your life is indelibly changed. You had this path that you're on for 10, 20, 30 years, and then all of a sudden that's not there. And the mistake that I made is that I didn't grieve that relationship properly at the outset. And so I just jumped into the new life that I thought that was the right one for me. And I carried baggage into my next relationship, which was the intermediate relationship before the one that I'm now in with Tina. And that was, it was caustic to that relationship. It wasn't healthy for me because it sat with me and it festered within me. And when I ended that relationship, I just decided to stay home for a couple of months, and I did a lot of crying. And it was actually grieving my first relationship as well as the one that was the intermediate relationship. And so, I've observed and now what my suggestion is, don't make any big decisions because your frame of reference has all changed. Don't buy the sports car, don't sell the business, don't change jobs, don't get the trophy girlfriend, maybe get the trophy girlfriend, but don't move in with her, and certainly don't get her pregnant. Again, what do you think of that advice?
Very good advice. It is a grief process. Divorce is the loss of what you thought was, a loss of a relationship, a loss of a family unit, a loss of half your assets, so there's a lot to grieve. And with any kind of grief process, we need to work through that before we're our best self to put ourselves into another relationship and give it our best, right? So generally, anyone that jumps into something too quickly, it doesn't work out because you're not giving it your all. You're still dealing with the past. You haven't dealt with the grief or what have you, So I always say it's 2 years. It's a 2-year process to really find your feet and get back on track and have healed and be ready to give your all to something new, whether it's a business or a relationship or what have you, So 12 months, I think, minimum. But 18 months to 2 years before you kind of can breathe again.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, and apologies for the interruption. I wanted to share with you that this show is one that we, the team, collectively pour a lot of effort into. There's resources that are involved. We have producers, promoters, and wonderful guests that share their time with us so that you may learn and possibly, hopefully, make some impact on the world as a result of that learning. The only thing I ask of you is go and check out my website. There's a diagnostic tool on there. There's a free downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, remarkably called 2 Commas. And there is some other fascinating resources that I'm not going to tell you about because you need to go to the website to check them out. So thanks for listening, and please continue enjoying the show. I often work with people that are in a business partnership together, and one of my first questions for them is, how is your relationship with your business partner? And I look for the things that are not said as much as the things that are said. And what I've observed over time is that people, assuming they've got a significant other, a spousal relationship as well, is that if the business partnership and the marriage are both going well, life is good. If one of those is not going well, life's a little bit shaky. But I've observed where both of those things are kind of on the rocks, and that's a absolute sure case for heading into depression or some form of alcoholism or drug abuse. That's my observation over time. The subtext to that is that those are the 2 most important relationships for you to manage and get working properly over time. what are some things that people can do to make sure that they navigate, maybe it's their marriage, maybe it's their business partnership, that they keep that thing running as smoothly as they possibly can?
Good question. I feel that, leaving work at work, if you've got problems with your business partner, your partner's probably not the best person to unload to every day because they can't change that dynamic. Only you can. So getting some outside help, with a business coach or a mentor or something outside of the marriage to help with the complications if there are with a business partner. As a partner, listening to somebody come home every night and complain about, what's going on with their business partner, it's best to just listen and not give advice and not try and fix it because you can't fix it, and that they're not going to really take your advice or let you fix it for them anyway. They just need someone to vent to, which is fine, but don't vent all the time because it's just going to break down the relationship at home as well as the relationship at work, right? So we want to preserve that healthy relationship at home and deal with the toxic, per se, relationship at work with outside professionals. Yeah.
Yeah. The work that I do is about helping people with their business, but in one of my engagements, they have a business coach who's more of a actual high performance sports coach. And his work is team-based, and the thing that they have shared with me that they work on there with their business partner, with him, each other together, and the coach in the room, is that they sit there and say, one of the things that I really appreciated about you in the last month is, this is a regular habit for them, last month you said something that I wasn't sure about, and I just wanted to check in with you to make sure that I understood it correctly because I made it mean this thing over here. And then if there was anything that you could do to improve in my eyes based upon your interaction with the business, it's this. And they have this structured exercise every month. I've never seen such a tight business relationship.
So good.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's giving people that safe space to feel like they can bring those challenging questions or what have you to the table and not be challenged for it, right?
Yeah. Not go into fight, flight, or defend kind of mode. Yeah.
Just sit with it and work together to resolve it.
Yes. Yeah. My hypothesis is, you mentioned that you had a divorce situation, and I think you're from a home that had a divorce as well. Yeah. So I've had a divorce. I was brought up in a solo parent family. My father decided to leave before I was born, so that was a specific dynamic. Are people that have experienced divorces more likely to end up in that situation themselves?
Look, the research says yes, but I can speak from experience that I took, a long time to marry my husband because I didn't want to make the wrong decision. I wanted to think that when I was getting married, it was forever. I didn't want to go down that path that my parents ended up going down. And so I felt like I was, taking it slow, making the right decisions for me, but still ended up in that situation anyway. So I don't think there's any right or wrong. It's just what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've said publicly that complacency is the silent killer. Tell me more.
I think, you can, especially when you've been together for years, you take each other for granted. You forget to check in. You forget to maybe do nice things for each other, you become, especially if you've got kids and a few kids, sometimes it can be all about just surviving and looking after the household and the children and managing the finances, and you forget about each other. So taking some time out for each other each day just to ask, how was your day, and then some time away from the home together. So just going off and having, I don't really like the word date night, but doing activities or doing something together without the children or the friends and everyone else, because that's where you can really find that deep connection.
Do you think that people taking breaks in their relationship is a good or a bad thing to do?
I don't think it's a good thing, but I think if one person in the relationship desperately wants that break to see, what life is like on the other side, it gives them a taster. And sometimes they do come back because they realize maybe life wasn't so bad after all at home. But, opposite, it can end up destroying the relationship and one party moves on pretty quickly. And sometimes it's the party that didn't want it that moves on really quickly because they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go with my life. Yeah, yeah.
I was given that advice many years ago that I was a very young man and relationship difficulties at that stage, and I wanted to head off and kind of have a break, and he goes, you'll never go back. because you'll experience this taste of freedom that you are not perceivedly getting at the moment. And he was correct. And so that's the sense that I've had from the outside.
Yeah, 10% of people get back together.
Wow.
That's very low.
Okay.
So when you make that call, really sit with it and know that there's a 90% chance that you won't go back.
Yeah. An alternative, and I've had a practice of doing this every year for actually the duration of my relationship with Tina, is that I spend 5-6 days a year by myself together, so a week away by myself. And that's not a break from our relationship because it's just me, no digital, no interactions with any other humans. I take all the food that I need to someone's place, an island or a beach somewhere. And it's an incredibly great opportunity for self-reflection, what's important in my life. I have intention practices around journaling and yoga and stretching and all that sort of stuff, getting into nature. And it only, like, one of the key things that always happens for me is I miss the hell out of my wife, and I really look forward to getting back to seeing her again. Such a great thing to do.
I love that. So I don't have a partner, but 1 week a year when my daughter goes off with her dad on holiday, I make myself take a holiday and I go away, often on my own, sometimes with friends, but it is the best week of my year. I can get up when I want. I can do what I want all day. I can read, I can journal, I can swim, and it's just nice to, I think, just ground yourself again in who you are and take that time away from the world. So I think it's amazing that you do that and that your partner's okay with that, because there's many partners that wouldn't be okay with that, and that's a problem.
It's so funny. The first time that I did it was in between one of the COVID breaks, and I decided on that trip that I would ask Tina to marry me. And so she was very supportive of it the first time, but the outcome after the first trip was that I proposed to her about a month later. And so she's been incredibly supportive of it ever since then because there was a great outcome. So she's very, very supportive.
So, but now you have to, you set the standard. So what happens every time you come
Diamonds
back from
are
work?
expected, more dogs,
Duty free,
trips overseas, that sort of thing. So yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
Good.
You co-founded the Divorce and Separation Institute of New Zealand.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that and why did you do it?
Yeah. So as said earlier, I was the first divorce coach 10 years ago in New Zealand. So kind of a pioneer in the industry, and it's become, a growing market, and people are definitely understanding the role we play and how important it is. So there's many people that have been through their own divorces, or lawyers or mediators that are now also divorce coaching. And what we recognised, a group of us, that because we do come with so many different skill sets and diversity to that role, that we're not blurring lines between giving legal advice or divorce coaching if you're a lawyer, or if you're a mediator, that you're not mediating and divorce coaching that same person, because you need to be neutral as a mediator. And so there was becoming some blurred lines in the way some coaches were operating. So we recognised that we needed to have a governing body here in New Zealand that could just oversee how we all operated with a code of ethics and morals. It's ready to protect the public, so the public know that any coach that is under our banner of ADSI is operating within their realm and sticking to our code of ethics, and they're being governed. And if there are any coach-client problems, we're there to resolve them for them. So a bit of conflict resolution if need be as well. Yeah.
Good on you. So if someone was considering this process and getting a divorce coach, what would they look for in someone?
Yeah, so definitely someone that's done the right certification. And so under our banner of ADSI, the Institute, all our coaches are certified divorce coaches with their other different merits that they bring to the table. And we've assessed them as well, so they don't just get an automatic buy-in to be a member of our association. We assess them, we put them through some coaching competencies to make sure that they are coaching, not advice giving, not giving legal advice, all those things. So you will know from anyone under our directory that you're in good hands with any of our coaches. Yeah.
How does one spot the difference between coaching and advice giving?
Well, purely that. So coaching is just asking really good, powerful questions and getting the client to kind of do a little bit of deep thinking and come up with their own answers and solutions. We can give them examples per se and shift their perspective, but generally it's helping them understand, because usually you know the answer to your problems, right? And we all go looking for other people to fix our problems, but only we can truly fix our own problems.
Yeah. How expensive is getting divorced?
Look, it's up to you, and it's probably also dependent on what's involved in the asset pool. Sometimes the more you own, the more you owe, and the bigger cost there is involved in divvying up and dealing with what comes with separating assets. So if there's businesses involved, then they need to be valued. There's money being hidden. There's forensic accountants that need to be brought in. So, it can be costly if as I say, the more you have. But if you can communicate and be on the same page, and it's a pretty simple division of property, a lot of it you can do yourself, and then you're just getting your lawyer to write it up at the end and notarize it, right? So it depends on how you, show up.
Yeah. The decision that my ex and I made is that there was a environment and a space that we would have that we could communicate well in, and so we kind of created that to be able to work through things, because it was getting to the situation where lawyers were backwards and forwards, and I could feel that there was influence being placed on my ex by the lawyer that she was working with, known to be a real bulldog of a divorce attorney here in New Zealand. And, my attorney rolled their eyes and, oh, God, that guy, kind of thing. And so created the space. And then we agreed upon what the things were going to be, and literally signed a Post-it note that wasn't binding, but it was the intention that was there. And then we both honoured that intention. And so we did what you've suggested, which is that we went to the lawyer saying, please officiate this, notarize this for us, because we've sorted it out ourselves.
Yeah. And look, there's been many clients that are deep in the thick of that legal argument, and it's been going on for months, and they decide that actually we've lost control. So they pull out of that negotiation process, and they spend some time as a couple or an ex-couple talking together about, what they both feel is fair. You've had time to information gather and understand the big picture, which, is great in those early phases of working with lawyers, but then take a step out of that legal process and really talk about it with each other and figure out what's going to be the most equitable and fairest way to move forward with this, because ultimately you guys get to make those decisions. You don't need your lawyer to make all of those decisions for you. And then you can step back into that legal process once you've kind of outlined what you both think is fair. And as long as you're both getting independent legal advice from two different lawyers to make sure you've covered all your bases, then there's nothing that can be, put in place that's unresolvable. Yeah.
The too common notion is that it's more than $1 million. And so once you're up into that territory, if that amount is contended within the estate, then you end up in the jurisdiction of the High Court in New Zealand. And I've known people that have been through that process with a divorce, and the collective legal fees for an estate of, I think it was about $5 to $7 million that was at question here. So reasonably sized estate. And it was $500,000 of legal fees. And so, and that would have been spent if it was $50 million or $5 million. Of $5 million, it's a reasonably large chunk. And so those kind of, is that the quantum that people could expect if they end up in that situation?
Yeah, and we're talking $250,000 per person, right? Like, that's not as a total. So because, if you end up in the High Court,
Both got to bear costs.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you look at the bottom line, what could you have done with that $250,000?
It's a lot of money.
It's
a kid through private school, right?
That's right. It's a kid's university and more, So it's maybe the difference between being able to buy a house and not buy a house, So all of these things you need to take into account before you escalate things, like take a step back. I always say, just pause, take a step out for a while, really think about the impact that's going to have on you, your financial future, and your relationship. Because if you're arguing in the High Court and you've got children, how does that bode well in front of the children? How do you want your children to look back and see how you both handled yourselves through that process?
Essentially, it becomes public information as well, because case law is available, I think, for everybody, unless it's put into a locked box, which is quite rare.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, again, how do you want to show up? How do you want to be perceived?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I had the do-over opportunity again, and I hope to not do that situation, I would definitely be talking to a divorce coach. You've convinced me that it's a valid and a sensible path to head down. You've got the navigation of the potentially the back end of the relationship, but also maybe the opportunity to heal that relationship as well. So that's are we actually here, or could we go back and kind of make this thing work? Is the first thing. Putting aside the sunk cost bias, there was something that was there in the first place. Then if that's not achievable, then it's a navigating it with consciousness, with some pride, with awareness of the consequences of what it is that you're going to do, and also managing and mitigating risk and cost that will be attached to someone who perhaps may not look after your interests as well as you as the divorce coach would. Have I kind of captured that in essence well?
Absolutely. And along with that, it's about learning how to manage your own emotions. Like if a divorce coach can hold that mirror up and show you how you lashing out and being highly emotional during that process has, kind of unwound some of the good work that you've done, then it helps you to work through who you want to be in that process, how you manage your emotions. You can say and do what you need to do in private, but when you're in that negotiation process, or you're communicating with your ex about things, then just show up like it's more of a business deal than an ending of a relationship and bringing all that baggage and emotion into those discussions, because it's never gonna go well if we're emotional.
One of the things I've learned over time through various pursuits, Buddhism particularly, is that I am not my thoughts and I am not my feelings. Those things are manifesting within me and they're present within me, but they shouldn't govern how I behave or how I interact with the world, or ideally what I make things mean. Is that some of the things that you kind of help people work their way through as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. And also, we can't control or change what that other person is doing, but we can control and change how we show up and what we do. So if that's not working for you, what can you do differently to get a better outcome?
Yeah. The Stoics would say that's actually the only thing that we genuinely have control over is what we make things mean, and then how we react or respond to those things. I'm a recovering control freak. I had a conversation with someone this week on the podcast about it, funnily enough. So here we are.
And look, I think, many of us who are entrepreneurs and have gone through a divorce, we do like to maybe control things, but there's definite areas of our lives that we need to take a step back and not try and control. And having children teaches you that, because you can't control everything they do. They've got to learn from their own mistakes, as do we, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So you've been a beauty therapist, you've become an entrepreneur as a consequence of that, you're a divorce coach. There's an alternate universe. There's another Kimberlee that lives in that universe. She's deeply happy from an alternate career. What would that career be?
I would love to go back and become a psychologist. People's psyche, and especially in both roles that I've had in my career to date, people fascinate me. Yeah, I'm trying to encourage my daughter to go to university and do it, just so I can live through you.
Don't you coach people out of doing that? Isn't that? Was it physician take by medicine?
That's the control.
Yeah, okay. At an amateur level, I'm an enthusiast of all things Jung, particularly, and a little bit of Freud scattered around. And I find it fascinating, the incredible thinking that Jung did in such a long time ago, relative to today, 100 years ago, and a lot of the things that there's one that I've come across recently. I recommended a book for a long time called From Strength to Strength, Charles M. Brooks, and he talks about life as being in two phases. There's the learn, grow, earn kind of phase, making money, making something of yourself in the world. And then there's the next phase that if you take the skill sets and the mentality into this next phase, that you expect to be better than everyone else, smarter than everyone else, and quicker than everyone else, then that won't serve you well, because the next phase is the return phase. And so I thought, this is great work, and I recommended the book to a whole bunch of people, and I dropped it into my book that I was writing about recently, and I thought I need to reference this properly. I went back and found that he just plagiarized Jung's work. Jung talks about the second mountain. The first mountain was you climb with career and family and that sort of stuff. And the second mountain is making a meaning and a purpose out of life beyond making money and the things that you attach your life to in the start of your life. So fascinating.
That is fascinating.
Yeah.
That is.
Kimberlee, great conversation today. Very enlightening and insightful. And I hope that it's been of service and value to people that are watching it. I've really enjoyed the chat.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Thank
Lots
you.
of fun.
Thank
Thank you.
If you enjoy these episodes, I hope you do. I love filming them, and the guests always say what a great and often cathartic experience it is for them. Then please do like and share. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm open to connect requests, and occasionally get emails from people as well asking me about my experience around certain subjects. So please do like and share, and continue to follow the show. I really appreciate your ears.